Hello, everybody. I'm Fiona Clark from Harley Street Emporium and the Menopause Research and Education Fund. I've spent the last 5 or 6 years or so as a journalist looking very deeply at skincare and various other aspects of women's health. And today I am talking to the very lovely Clare Kiely, who is the co-founder of Skin Diary. She's also has a CV as long as your arm, pretty much, which is includes being a consultant dermatologist at Guy's and St Thomas's and the Lister Hospital. She is an expert in skin ageing, photodamaged, and aesthetic medicine. She has a master's in skin ageing and aesthetic medicine, in fact, and is also an honorary lecturer at Manchester University. So there's not much that she doesn't know about skincare. Now, Claire, turning to you.
Fiona.
One of the biggest things that people worry about is skin ageing. What are the factors that come into that? Why do they worry about that?
The first thing that we think about are the fact that there is intrinsic skin aging and extrinsic skin aging. Intrinsic skin aging is basically our body's natural aging process, which is partly to do with our genetics and just also to do with the passage of time. And then extrinsic skin aging is all of the other factors outside of our control, the environment, UV exposure, things like exposure to environmental toxins like smoking and things like that also affect aging. And with our skin, when you say people worry about skin aging, I think people kind of more worry possibly about the appearance of their skin and how it's going to look as they age. But from our point of view, as dermatologists, and especially from my point of view in the arena of skin cancer, we are also thinking more so about how skin aging is affecting skin health and how we can intervene in that process to improve people's skin health as they age. So, that's a big factor about why I kind of got involved in skincare, more so to try and guide people into the right things that they should be putting on their skin to improve their skin health as they age. And it's a really exciting arena because there's lots of more ingredients coming out all the time.
That is very true. Before we get to them, you mentioned in there sun damage now, and that you also have a very long history in treating skin cancers.
Yes.
Being an Australian, obviously, we have very high rates of skin cancer. In fact, I think it's 2/3 of people by the time they're 70 will have some type of skin cancer. But rates here are rising as well.
Yes.
Now, there are various different types of skin cancer. We often think about melanoma, but there are lots of other ones and a lot of things that come before that. Just explain to us how this happens and what the processes are and the different types of skin cancers that you're starting to see.
So, obviously, you've mentioned Australia. There's a kind of a displaced population there. You have people with light skin in a very, very sunny climate, and that is a big factor in the rates of skin cancer. But the Australians have done a really good job with the slip, slap, slop campaigns, and, the levels are now actually on reducing, and, they've banned sunbeds, which is a thing that a lot of dermatologists would wish could be done in this country. So sun exposure is one of the main factors in the development of all types of skin cancer. Sunburn, particularly sunburn in youth, has a major impact in developing melanoma-type skin cancer. So that's why there has been a lot of campaigning about getting kids to be very diligent putting their sunblock on, and parents to try and get their kids to wear sun protective clothing, because we know that kids' skin is very, very susceptible to UV. When you think about it, their epidermis and dermis is just thinner, so the rays can actually penetrate deeper, and sunburn has a big implication in the development of melanoma skin cancer. The other types of skin cancer, which are much more common actually than melanoma, are the non-melanoma or keratinocyte skin cancers. And these are mainly basal cell carcinomas and more so squamous cell carcinoma. So the rates of squamous cell carcinoma are really on the rise, and squamous cell carcinoma happens to be my subspecialty area of interest. It's one of the forgotten skin cancers. We have good treatments for basal cell carcinomas, which include things like Mohs micrographic surgery, which I do myself. And we have in the last 10 or so years some really excellent new treatments for melanoma. Squamous cell carcinomas have kind of been slightly forgotten about because they have always been seen as the skin cancer that is of the elderly. It's much more common to get squamous cell carcinomas as you get older. These type of skin cancers are due to cumulative sun exposure. So cumulative UV exposure that just builds up over your lifetime from the day dot. And eventually, with accumulation of all of this DNA damage, your immune system basically can't cope anymore, and you'd get mutated clones developing and skin cancers forming. So with squamous cell carcinomas, the rates are increasing in the elderly population. And the important thing to note about that is that because people are living longer, we have more years of cumulative sun exposure. So the rates of particularly squamous cell carcinomas are really actually skyrocketing. So it's something that we need to get a handle on.
Yes, absolutely. And in the past, I remember they used to say, don't worry about actinic keratosis which are the sort of those dry, rough patches that you can get on your skin. Don't worry about them; they're not important. But they can actually go on to develop into a squamous, can't they?
Yeah. So we consider those as precancerous lesions. So you might hear about how the NHS is now overflowing with skin cancer, and that we are having a hard time at seeing patients with inflammatory skin disease like eczema and psoriasis and acne, because we're dealing with so much skin cancer. So we're dealing with a lot of skin cancer, but also lots and lots of these precancerous lesions. Something like 1 in 4 people will get an actinic keratosis. So they're really, really common. They are basically little, as you said, little patches of red scaly skin. And what that is an indication of is accumulative DNA damage in that area, which has led to the skin basically not being able to form normal skin anymore. Most actinic keratosis will just stay as actinic keratosis and don't progress on. But we say about 1 in 200 of them will actually go on to progress to become a skin cancer. So that's why we do like to treat them. And we like to inform people that once they've had them, this is an indication that you have had your threshold of sun exposure. It's kind of a warning sign that your skin is telling you, that you need to look after your skin now and wear your sunblock and, cover up and sit in the shade and do all the things that we tell people to do to reduce their sun exposure.
Yes, absolutely. I'm just thinking about my own personal experience of 2 squamous cell carcinomas, 2 basal cell carcinomas, face full of actinic keratosis, and yet do I still listen? No. So speaking of that brings us nicely on to sunscreens and prevention. Now, there are different types of sunscreen. What are the different types, and what should people be looking for when they go out and they browse that shelf in the supermarket for them?
Okay. So sunscreen is always a very contentious topic, and one that we love talking about, because obviously we are recommending these creams and telling people to put them on a lot, so we need to know a lot about them. The first thing I always tell people about sunblock is to find one that you like, because people often say, well, should I be wearing a mineral or physical sunblock? Or should I be wearing an organic or a non-organic? So basically, it's
what
all
are the differences
about,
between those two?
So the mineral sunblocks are what we call physical sunblocks. So they're zinc oxide and titanium dioxide. Certain people veer towards them because they are less, in some people, they're less likely to irritate the skin. So if you've sensitive skin, generally people go for those types of sun protection. The organic or chemical sunblocks then are, there's a myriad of different UV filters that make up the chemical sunscreens. Sometimes just the name chemical sunblock puts people off, which it really shouldn't. They are not risky in any way, and they're very, very good sunblocks. It's just that they suit some people's skin better. The physical sunblocks tend to be the ones that leave you with a little bit of a white cast. So they often work quite well in tinted sunblocks. And the chemical or organic sunblocks basically, don't leave a white cast. But as regards how they work, we used to think that the physical sunblocks just reflected UV and the chemical sunblocks absorbed it. But we now know that actually both of them do a bit of both, and it's a bit more complicated than that. But they both work very well. Most of the sunscreens, the really good sunscreens on the market now, actually are a mixture of both types. Some of the physical sunblocks, like the zinc oxides, are developed now as nanoparticles, so you don't get as much of a white cast. So really the cosmetic scientists have done an amazing job over the last few years developing some really elegant sunscreen formulations that are are great. So everyone should be able to find one that suits them. But it's a really individual thing, when people ask what sunblock to use, because, if you're a younger person and you're kind of acne prone and you don't want a thick, heavy, rich sunblock, then people tend to like the more fluid, light, kind of matte type sunblock. If you're, my age or over and your skin's maybe starting to dry out and you want a nice creamy sunblock, there are those too. I generally try to tell people, make your sunblock your moisturizer, because you don't want to add another step onto your routine. Everybody's busy, and actually asking people to put on sunblock in the morning, if it's just an extra thing to do on top of all the myriad of things that people have to do, like in the morning, getting the kids out and everything, people just won't do it. So if it's your moisturizer and it's just part of your routine, then it just becomes an automatic thing. Now, what I don't mean by that is using the sunscreens that are the moisturizers that have a bit of SPF in them. I mean, finding a sunblock that is nice enough for you to use as a moisturizer.
And when you say a sunblock, there are different types of light rays there are different types of light rays that we need to be looking out for: UVA, UVB, visible light, those kinds of things. So how do people know what it is that they're actually looking for? And also the other side of that is the SPF itself. We've got 15, 30, 50, some of them are 100. Yeah. Does that really matter?
Yeah. It becomes very confusing for people. I mean, most dermatologists will tell you anything over an SPF of 30. Below that, what are you really trying to achieve? If we're telling people not to get a tan, you need to be thinking over an SPF of 30. Ideally, with 50, you're getting a little bit extra block. You're not getting actually, that much extra. With the SPF 30, it's something like a 97% UVB block. With an SPF of 50, it's more around 98.5. So, the difference isn't huge, but we always tell you go for the highest one that you can. And most sunblocks are that are still nice to use and nice on the face anyway, are around the SPF 30 to 50. Once you start getting higher, they tend to be a little bit more chalky and are, can be nice for the body, but maybe not so great for the face. SPF denotes the UVB protection, and then you also have a separate UVA protection. So when we say broadband spectrum protection, what we're talking about is both UVA and UVB. So don't just look at the SPF level. You also need to make sure there's some UVA protection in there. UVA is the rays that penetrate deeper, so they can penetrate deeper into the dermis, and they're really implicated in reactive oxygen species and free radicals and all these things that we know cause aging and kind of longer term problems in the skin. So I think people get confused as well by the UVA ratings because they're different in different places. Boots came out with the 5-star rating, which we're kind of used to here in the UK. And it makes sense, because basically it's a star rating and you can get, from 1-star protection to 5-star protection. But if you're looking at sunblocks that are produced elsewhere in Europe and Asia, they have a PA rating. And you get a PA plus, there's 4 pluses, is the best of the UVA rating. So that's what you kind of need to look at when you're looking at sunblocks. So it's either the star rating or the PA plus rating. In recent years, we've realised that high energy visible light, which is just a little bit higher on the energy spectrum, also causes some problems. More so for pigmentation and more so in people with darker skin types who might be prone to pigmentation, things like melasma. Protection against high energy visible light, we think, becomes important then. So there are some sunblocks which have a HEV protection as well, but really, the most important thing is your UVA and UVB protection.
2 things out of that. UVA penetrates glass. So people who think, I don't need my SPF because I'm just going to the office today, are they wrong? Should they be wearing it every single day?
Even amongst dermatologists, there is a lot of debate about this at the moment. I mean, I am definitely in the camp of, we should just give people simple messaging and tell them to wear their sunblock all the time. Even as a dermatologist, I try to wear my sunblock all the time. Do I wear my sunblock every single day of the year? No, I don't. I forget it sometimes. I just am too busy. I don't have any in the house. There's lots of reasons. But if you kind of keep it in the back of your mind that you just need to put it on all the time, if you even do it 50% of the time, then you're reducing that cumulative exposure over your lifetime. So that's good enough. Yes, UVA penetrates glass. So if you are sitting in a very bright room all day beside glass, you are getting some UVA exposure, which, again, will build up over the years. There's that very famous photograph that always gets brought up at dermatology meetings of the truck driver.
Yeah.
And half his face is very, very weathered and aged, and the other half isn't. And
It's an amazing picture.
Amazing picture, yeah. That is, because it's just so clear that this guy was sitting driving his truck, and yes, the UVA rays were coming through, and that's what happens. So I think some of the dermatologists think it might be overkill to be telling people to wear sunblock every day. And this is all very healthy debate for people to have amongst themselves, because there are no absolutes. A lot of dermatologists think if we're just trying to reduce people's skin cancer risk, we should just be telling them, wear your sunblock April till October, and when the sun is at, when you're going outside, which logistically makes sense. There's lots of reasons. Sunblock can be quite impractical. It's expensive. Putting it on all the time, it's expensive, and putting it on every 2 hours, really. We tell people to do that, but does anyone realistically put sunblock on every 2 hours? I don't think so. I mean,
no.
for me...
But the other thing too, a lot of people will rely on it in their makeup, perhaps.
Yes.
And, is that good enough, the sunblock?
No. The problem with that is in makeup and in moisturisers that aren't specifically designated as sunblocks, they don't actually have to adhere to the same rules as the sunblock. So basically they can get away with just having an SPF. So a lot of them have, maybe SPF 15, SPF 30, but they won't have any UVA protection, which is interesting because, a lot of people putting those moisturisers on or the makeup on think that they're doing it to help aging. And they're actually just getting UVB protection. So they're just reducing the risk of sunburn. So really, I think... it's not enough. I mean, if it's there and it's a little extra, in your makeup, then great. But don't rely on that as your sole UV protection.
Yeah, and that's important. UVA, UVB, nice way of remembering. 1A for aging, B for burnout.
Yes.
Yeah. The other, for those of us, two arguments out of this is we often hear people with darker skin types saying, "Oh, well, I'm naturally protected because I've got so much melanin in my skin already." Do they need to use sunblock as much?
Yes, this is again, up for debate. I mean, I would say yes. I have colleagues with darker skin who are dermatologists who think it's not for them and they don't do it. But, if you ask any of the experts in skin of colour, the issue is pigmentation. Pigmentation is a huge problem in patients with skin of colour. And, again, as you age, the melanocytes are also affected. So pigmentation can be one of those kind of longer term things that you might get away with when you're younger. And then all of a sudden, over the years, you're left with blotchy pigmentation. So my answer to that would be probably burning isn't obviously such a big issue, but the development of all the other problems like pigmentation and age-related changes are just the same.
Yeah. Back to the visible light. If, for those of us like me who spend hours in front of a screen every day,
yes.
should we be particularly worried about that? Should we also be looking then for a sunscreen that has that in it?
Yeah.
Or is it really not that big an issue?
So this became kind of a hot topic recently, and even the ophthalmologists were looking into it to see, if it was the screens were damaging our eyes. Again, it comes down to this. So it's the high energy blue light that's emitted from screens is the problem. But I read an interesting statistic that you'd need to sit in front of a computer screen for 64 days to get the same amount of high energy blue light that you would get from being outside in the sun for an hour. So, the sun is, the biggest emitter of all forms of UV. So, I think we can maybe not worry so much about our screens.
Good. The other thing that's interesting in skincare in general and also in sunscreens is the ingredients that we use in them. When we're looking at general anti-aging skincare, are there any particular ingredients that we should be looking out for that are good for A, reversing sun damage, or B, just general anti-aging?
Parking sunblock, and so obviously sunblock, if you're not doing your sunblock, I always tell people none of the rest of it matters. So sunblock is definitely, the queen bee right there at the top. Next in the kind of with the queen bee status are definitely the topical retinoids. The retinoids have been very well studied. They're a family of vitamin A derivatives that have been around for a very, very long time, and it is well accepted in both the scientific literature and just from our clinical perspective that the retinoids are very, very effective at reversing UV damage and photodamage. The best of the bunch is tretinoin, which is all trans-retinoic acid, which is the form that's in your skin anyway. That is a prescription grade ingredient. The reason that it's prescription grade is because it can cause irritation and peeling and problems if it's not monitored and used correctly. And everyone can handle different levels of tretinoin, so it's quite individual. There are then the over-the-counter retinoids. It's a growing family of retinoids, and each of the retinoids in the family has to basically convert in an enzymatic step to become all trans-retinoic acid in your skin to work. So some of them are kind of further down the chain. You have the retinol esters, which are further down the chain. And then you have things like retinaldehyde, which is actually just one step away from the queen bee tretinoin. So actually the retinaldehyde probably has the most evidence towards efficacy.
So basically you're looking then at something like, I'd say, a retinol palmitate at the ester end.
Yes.
Your retinol that most people would be very familiar with.
Yes.
Then your retinaldehyde, which is often called retinal.
Yes.
And then your tretinoin.
Yes, exactly. So that's kind of the scale of things. So basically the way people look at it is the retinol esters. If you have very sensitive skin or if you've had problems with retinoids in the past, you might start with those and kind of work your way up. Retinol is the vitamin A derivative that's kind of ubiquitous in skincare, but not all products are formulated the same. So, just talking about the chemical compounds and, for people who are trying to decide what product to use, it can be quite tricky because even if you know all about the retinoid family, and you go and you think, okay, I'm going to get a retinaldehyde, and then you look at the packet, look at the INCI list, and you see that it's there. The problem is, knowing how much of it's there, knowing how it was formulated is in a delivery system that's going to actually penetrate the skin and do what it's told. There's so many different variables. There's also new retinoids. I don't know if you've heard of this gram-active retinoid, which is like a synthetic retinoid, which can stimulate different retinoid receptors. So, there's promising research towards effect with those, but nothing anywhere near what we have with the tretinoin, where we can see the real effects, going back in randomized controlled trials over the last 30 years. But it is a minefield. I mean, that's just one ingredient. So that's just vitamin A's. There are so many more. So skincare gets very, very confusing and very scientific, and it makes it tricky for consumers. And this is another reason why I've kind of gotten involved in this, because I've talked to so many very confused people over the years who really want to be using skincare that's good for their skin, but have been bamboozled by the science and the pseudoscience and the marketing. But there are some really great products out there and some really great ingredients that can have a really good impact on the skin. So, it's just about getting the right advice, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. With most of the over-the-counter skincare with retinol, retinal, and the esters, how stable is it? I mean, how do we know that we're actually getting what we're paying for? Does price matter?
Yeah.
And what happens in 6-12 months down the track when that's been sitting on your shelf? Should we be thinking about packaging and things like that as well?
Yes. I mean, this is a problem. The stability of retinoids are unstable compounds, and there has been a lot of work in developing stable forms in skincare. So it depends on how it's formulated, really, and no, the price doesn't seem to match with that. There was one recent study by Tomova's group, and they looked at 12 of the commercially available vitamin A creams, and they did just that. They looked at the retinol, retinaldehyde, whatever was in the packaging, and how it was degrading over time, and they found some major discrepancies between what was on the labels and what was actually in the packet. Even on opening, some of them only had about 50% of the retinols.
I think there was one in there that you mentioned that
didn't
even have any in it.
That had, none. So, whether it was put in at the beginning and it just had degraded because it was sitting on the shelf for so long, or the packaging maybe, as you said, wasn't good. I mean, these compounds generally degrade on exposure to light and air. So, that's why things like airless packaging and dark packaging are often used. But, these are cosmetic products. So, that kind of testing generally isn't done by the companies to see if it's going to be stable 12 months, 18 months. I mean, they tested them. The products are obviously, of course, tested for safety. There are some very, very good products out there. I think finding one that you like, sticking with it if you like it, and then getting advice again from experts. I think in that study, some of the cheaper products didn't fare up so well, but in general, I don't think the price is what is going to indicate the quality, unfortunately. You just need to trust, I think, the source.
Yeah. Interesting, people say, why do I have to have all of these products that have got this in it, this in it, this in it, and this in it? Why can't they all just be bumped into one product?
Yes.
And there are some people who've tried to do that, but are there some things that just don't, you mentioned stability, there's some things that just don't go well together?
Yes. I mean, cosmetic science and cosmetic formulating is complex, and I am not a cosmetic scientist. And I think that's one of the things cosmetic scientists, from speaking to them, don't like dermatologists stepping over into that world. We understand active ingredients and we understand how they play on the skin and what they do and how they can benefit all the cellular structures. They understand how to formulate fantastic products that actually work, and that is complex. Our cosmetic formulator at the Skin Diary, he has a PhD just in emulsion science. That's how oil and waters mix, and how ingredients can transfer across the stratum corneum and get to where they need to be. So there is a lot of intricacies about pH and emulsion and how delivery systems. Some things do work very well together, but there are so many between the vitamin A derivatives, vitamin C, all the different antioxidants, niacinamide, polyphenols, all the lovely peptides we have now, and the AHAs, and there's such a myriad of new skincare ingredients. They're never going to all sit well together in the same formulation. So we leave that to the cosmetic scientists to tell us, which ingredients play well together and which don't. From my point of view, it's good to use lots of different types of ingredients. Using the same thing, I think people run into problems, especially things like vitamin C serums. Vitamin C is a great antioxidant, the most abundant antioxidant in our skin and the most well-studied antioxidant.
And what do antioxidants do? Why do we need them?
Antioxidants, UVA particularly, when it hits the skin, causes these things called free radicals. And I think that's a great way to describe them, because they are basically bumping around and stealing electrons from all the different cells in your skin. And in doing that, they're causing a lot of damage. Antioxidants basically will donate a free radical without becoming oxidized themselves. And so they're the little sacrificial bunnies willing to give up their electron to calm down the free radical. They are very important. We have our own endogenous antioxidants. We make our own, and we get the ones that we don't make, we get through our diet. So things like vitamin C is one that we have to take through our diet. On the skin, we know that vitamin C depletes because of the passing of time and age and because of UV exposure. And we can replete it by putting it on topically. So vitamin C is definitely one of the good ones, but we run into problems because it has to be formulated at a low pH for it to work. It's quite sensitive, vitamin C. It's very easily oxidized, and it has to be formulated at a low pH that is quite acidic for our skin. And if you're putting that on twice a day, every day, some people run into problems with that. And you'll often hear people say, oh, yeah, I can't use vitamin C because I have breakouts. And that is most likely because it's maybe altering their pH and their microbiome and that. So, and the interesting thing about vitamin C, and Sheldon Pennell actually did these studies back in, I think it was in the 90s, but he showed that it has a half-life in the skin of 4 days. So it does have a little bit of a reservoir. So that's why, I tell people, well, if you're having problems, you don't need to put it on every single day. But getting some vitamin C in the L-ascorbic acid form, that's a whole other avenue. We could go down talking about different types of vitamin C, but the L-ascorbic acid is the form that's active in the skin. So that is the best vitamin C in any skincare product.
So L-ascorbic acid being when we pick up a product and it says it's got that in it, it has studies show that it has to be effective between a certain range. Sort of
Yes.
I think it's sort of 8 or 10 to 20% or something like that.
Yeah.
When we look at the back of a product, and you mentioned the Inky there before, which is basically the list of ingredients in a product, how do we know we've got enough?
So oftentimes the product will tell you the percentage. So usually it's anything between kind of 5 and 20. I mean, some products will say they have over that. There has been this kind of battle of the percentages going on because people think
If a
the
little bit's
higher
good,
the better.
more must be better.
Yeah, more must be better. And that is really not the case. Anything I think above 5, below 20, I would say. The other thing to look for is, does it say L-ascorbic acid? The thing that you don't know from looking at it, you can tell a bit from an Inky list, but you can't tell how it's been formulated. So in our products, the L-ascorbic acid is encapsulated. So things that are
So that
in
means
drug
that it's
delivery
like slow
systems.
releases and it doesn't irritate as much.
So L-ascorbic acid it doesn't like lipids. So you have to encapsulate it in a lipid so that it can basically enter into the skin to go where you want it to go. But it also kind of protects it from degradation and that. But when you're looking at an Inky list, you don't know what form products are in, and you don't know if they've been the kind of delivery systems. There's lots of types of different types of vitamin C now, which are much more stable forms of vitamin C.
But
Originally,
are they as
it was so probably yes, definitely less effective. But I think probably the science will get there. But right now, the problem is the ones that are much more stable, these kind of ascorbyl versions of L-ascorbic acid, they were originally used as vitamin C, oral tablets. So they're broken down by the gut, but your skin might not be able to break these down as well. There are studies showing that they can be effective, and some of the newer ones, there's definitely evidence towards effect. So what they would have to do is get into the skin and then change into the active L-ascorbic acid form. We just don't have the same amount of studies as we do for L-ascorbic acid. So for me, I will always take an L-ascorbic acid over any of the other forms just because, it works.
Yeah. The other thing that's a real bugbear for me, and it just drives me absolutely batty, and I know that that when they came out, it was a lovely fashion statement, and they look absolutely amazing in your bathroom with these lovely little brown bottles with their drippers on top, full of vitamin C that then get light, air, and everything into them, and every time you open them, you're virtually watching the product degrade in front of you.
So vitamin C is notoriously easily oxidized. That is why, there is kind of there's some companies that make some quite good vitamin Cs, like SkinCeuticals, and they have formulations that make it much more stable. It will still eventually oxidize because that's just what L-ascorbic acid will do. And then doing that, it kind of turns an amber colour and then a brown colour. And then you really shouldn't be using it because if it has oxidized, it's probably, it's not great to be putting that onto your skin. And some of the companies are a bit sneaky in that they make them already a kind of an orangey colour. So then you won't really know if it's oxidized or not. It's tricky because, as you said, it's packaging plays a big role. It's very difficult for the consumer to tell how long something's been on a shelf or if it has oxidized. Again, the way we get away with that in the skin diaries is it's just our vitamin C is freshly compounded and sent out that day. So, we can be very confident that our L-ascorbic acid is at the percentage that it is supposed to be. But again, I think with technology and
the other thing, I guess then you're not you don't need so many ingredients with it to keep it stable.
Yes.
But how long does it last when it's not surrounded by 1,000,001 preservatives?
Yes, these are the kind of testing that probably in the future we should be doing. With the skin diary products, we tell people to use it within a month. We're only giving you a month's worth, so then we give you another fresh batch every month. The science is progressing, and I think that new formulations of L-ascorbic acid will hopefully come out in the future that will be more stable. But for now, the pure form of L-ascorbic acid in that kind of fresh form is the best to use.
Yeah, absolutely. Very nice to have it delivered to you once a month in a nice fresh form that is fresh.
Yeah.
If people though are looking on a shelf and they're looking at that, I mean, if they're going to buy one over the counter, then really in theory they should be looking at something that is in an airtight container, light proof.
Yes, yes. Airtight is great. My only bugbear with a lot of the airtight containers is that they are not recyclable. It's a big bee in my bonnet. And I think cosmetics industry has enough money and backing that really,
They could work on it.
we need to work on that. I think we need to work on better packaging. With our Skin Diary products, everything is recyclable. But yes, if you're looking for something over the counter, airless packaging is probably what's going to give you the best guarantee of a fresh product that with active ingredients that are actually still active.
Yep. The other active ingredient that's very important is niacinamide. That seems to be the
Yes.
buzzword at the moment that everybody's having. What does it do?
Yes, yeah. Niacinamide is very topical, both in dermatology circles and out of dermatology circles. From our point of view, putting my kind of skin cancer hat on again, there was some studies in Australia a few years back which showed that taking oral supplementation of niacinamide reduced skin cancer risk in people with a higher risk of squamous cell carcinomas. It reduced the risk by about 23%, which is quite significant. So there's been a lot of studies done over the last few years trying to reproduce that. So that's what happens in medicine. You know, somebody comes up with a great theory in a study, and then lots of other studies have to be done to replicate and reproduce that, to validate that study. That's how evidence-based practice is done. So there's lots of studies going on at the moment trying to see, well, actually, you know, what dose of niacinamide should we be using? Is it actually reducing people's risk of skin cancer? The theory is good. You know, there's lots of murine studies, mouse studies, and in vitro studies, which show that both oral and topical niacinamide can reduce UV-induced immunosuppression. So when the sun hits your skin, it immunosuppresses your skin, and that's one of the things that allows skin cancers to grow. Oral and topical niacinamide definitely in the lab seems to reduce that. And there's been some studies done on topical niacinamide. There was one in the British Journal of Dermatology that showed that it reduced in human skin, that it actually did reduce UV-induced immunosuppression. So I often, with my patients who've had skin cancers, will recommend them to take some niacinamide. What I think people are a bit worried about, especially in the dermatology community at the moment, is about giving too much niacinamide, because there has been some studies in the States recently showing that overdosing on niacin is not good for you. So, you know, we're looking at, well, you know, is there a level? Should we be checking levels? I think maybe down the road that's something that we're going to be doing, is probably checking NAD levels, supplementing niacinamide to get your NAD levels up, and then when they're up, maybe stopping it, because we want to just supplement but not give too much. I think the way around that is to apply it topically.
Yeah, it should almost be in a sunscreen or in body moisturisers, really,
Yes,
shouldn't it?
well, niacinamide is in lots of products. It's quite a stable compound, and it's quite easy to formulate with. Yes, it is in lots of things, and it's very, very safe, and most people don't have any problems with it. So, you know, we're all for niacinamide being in lots of products. And there are lots of sunscreens with niacinamide in it. I always think that with things like that, you know, having it in a serum which goes on first is much better than having it mixed in with your SPF. But yeah, lots of research in that area. Again, you know, one that I'm really interested in, because anything that reduces your risk of skin cancer down the road, in my view, is worth doing.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of layering, then, actually, because you mentioned that before, I mean, people, you know, a lot things, because you can't put everything into one product, you end up with this sort of array of products sitting on your shelf, and it's like, what order do I use them in? I mean, should you be using a niacinamide, your vitamin B, before your vitamin C? Do you have to use your retinoids at night? Because there was also that what kind of worry that they increase your risk of sort of photosensitivity. Do those things hold true? What order do you use them in?
With the antioxidants, usually they are best used in the morning, because when you think about how they are working, they are actively, immediately reducing your free radical dose. So they should definitely be applied first thing and under your sunblock. So things like your vitamin C serums in the morning before your sunblock. Things like the regenerative creams are there for nighttime. So the retinoids, yes, they are applied at nighttime. When you talk about them increasing your risk of photosensitivities, there's actually quite a lot of studies showing that retinoids don't make you more photosensitive. in themselves. What is happening is when people overuse retinoids, their skin becomes a bit sensitized because of the retinoids. And if you go out into the sun with inflamed, sensitized skin, then that's just going to cause problems. So what we do know is that if you put retinols on in the morning, that they can be deactivated in UV. So that's why they're better off used at nighttime. So retinols and retinoids are all for nighttime, and then the other ones for the morning. Layering products doesn't really make sense. When you think about it, your skin is very good at its primary role. The main job of your skin is to keep you in and keep the environment out. And your stratum corneum does a really good job at that. It's like bricks and mortar. By layering products, you are probably just layering on things that you're eventually going to wash off. One of the hardest jobs that we have in skincare and topical products is actually getting things to cross that stratum corneum. So putting layers and layers and layers of kind of junk on top of each other is just not going to, it's not going to work. It's not going to be beneficial. So an antioxidant first thing, usually a serum because they're quite light and absorb well. Then your SPF, ideally a moisturizing SPF, and then your makeup. And then at nighttime, usually after cleansing, your retinoid or other products if you're using a glycolic acid, and sometimes people will also need to use a moisturizer as well depending on your skin type.
Yeah, because you end up with this sort of list of things on there, and then you throw in a tyrosinase inhibitor to get rid of your pigmentation and things like that. It's like how much room in one bathroom can you have?
Yeah, so I mean that's why kind of skin cycling, the idea behind skin cycling really does work. Again, I know it's a controversial area, but there's a lot of dermatologists who intuitively have been using skin cycling to treat and recommend to our patients for years. Especially.
And when you say skin cycling, what do you mean?
So I mean using active ingredients on certain nights and using kind of rest ingredients on other nights. Also cycling through things like your vitamin C and your niacinamide. There's so many, as we spoke about, there's so many different skincare products and there's more and more peptides and all these amazing things coming out now. And for me, I'm like that. I like to use lots of things. I like a bit of variety. I like to change things up. I kind of see it like your diet. You don't want to eat the same thing every day, even if you're trying to replenish your vitamin C. You're not just going to keep drinking orange juice every day. You need to mix things up. They say eat the rainbow, have lots of different things in your diet, lots of different fruit and vegetables to keep things, to make sure you're getting all of the nutrients. And replenishing the nutrients on your skin is kind of like that. We want to get the benefits of all of these different ingredients. So using them on different days and using different things in the right sequence, so that you might be using things that are slightly more irritating on certain days and then giving your skin a little break on other days, is a really nice way to do it. And especially if you're integrating things like the retinoids and the vitamin C's, there's lots of other things like peptides are very, very, very calming and soothing. Ceramides, definitely. The alpha hydroxyic acids then are known to be a little bit more exfoliating and irritating, but are also very good for your skin. But yeah, we have lots of different ingredients, and like that, we all kind of want to, try different things and use different things. So it's just a really nice way to do it, that you kind of can use lots of different products, but use them in a way that's actually good for your skin.
Now, when we say good for our skin, in terms of, given the fact that somebody like me who's covered themselves in baby oil and laying in the sun...
You still look great. You've gotten away with it, I think, Fiona.
Just. Are any of these things actually going to help repair the damage that I've done to myself?
Yes, absolutely. From a scientific point of view, we are looking at all of these ingredients for exactly that reason, for repairing damage. And the retinoids and vitamin C and niacinamide are definitely high up there in that scale of things. Peptides, we also think now are doing that, in all of the kind of in vitro studies. We can see that peptides are increasing growth factors. The problem we run into with cosmetic products, you might notice that sometimes the claims get kind of diluted. It reduces the signs of aging. And that is because once you make claims like reverses DNA damage, then you become more of a drug product. And that has a whole other area of regulation that the cosmetic companies don't want to get into. But it's a pity in a way, because a lot of these ingredients have some real drug-like effects. I'm just thinking about things like DNA repair enzymes.
Yeah, I was about to ask you about that. Actually, could you ever see a day when we have such an
Yes.
exciting thing?
Well, we
What
have
is it?
DNA repair enzymes, and there was an amazing scientist called Daniel Roche who did years of research studying DNA repair enzymes and figured out how to formulate them in a cream and did some great studies showing how they work. What's happened with that is that the cosmetics companies have kind of taken over these products and now are using them in creams, but we don't really know how much of the DNA repair enzymes are in there and if they're being formulated correctly. And anyway, the cosmetic companies can't really use that science commercially because they can't say that they're repairing DNA repair enzymes. So it's all a bit wishy-washy, and it's an area that I really am looking into for our Skin Diary products, because we want to get those in there and we want to get them formulated correctly. I mean, some of the science behind DNA repair enzymes is really fascinating. You have these enzymes that are made, that plants have. Particularly, there's endonucleases and photolyases, but particularly the photolyases are really fascinating because they are stimulated on exposure to UV. So basically, the plant is exposed to UV light, the photolyase kicks into action and immediately repairs the damage caused by the UV. So it's instantaneous repair of UV-induced damage. So it's really fascinating. I mean, when you think about it, plants are out there exposed to UV all day, so they have quite sophisticated mechanisms to protect themselves from UV damage. DNA repair enzymes, all of the polyphenols that they have in their kind of brightly covered skins, that's all lots of flavonoids and anthocyanins and things in the skin, which we're also now studying in skincare to see, can we use these compounds to also protect us and repair ourselves from UV damage.
Yeah, which makes absolute sense. You're actually working on a cream that's got some interesting ingredients in it.
Yes,
What is it?
that is soon to be revealed. So, well, my very esteemed colleagues, Professor Chris Griffiths and Dr. Tamara Griffiths, have been working on a product for years, which Chris has, he's renowned in the world of anti-aging skincare, and he is an emeritus professor in the University of Manchester in the skin aging research labs there, and has done lots of research through the labs. And self and Dr. Tamara Griffiths have a product which they have been working on for a long time and testing it in the labs up there. And it's basically a night cream for skin aging, which they tested in and compared it to prescription grade tretinoin, which no other.
That's a high bar to test
That's
against.
a high bar to test against. I mean, I don't know if there's any skincare company that would do that with their products, to test it against the gold standard prescription grade, but that's what they did. They did the Manchester patch test assay, which is the gold standard way of testing anti-aging creams on human skin, and they had 10 female volunteers. The average age was 70s, and they did skin biopsy specimens. So this is, human trials, and then looked at the results under the microscope, and they found that their product had the same efficacy as prescription grade retinoid for increasing elastin, so those elastin fibrils, which are between the dermal epidermal junction, which are really important for integrity and skin
Part of
function.
the scaffolding of the skin, along
They
with
are
the collagen,
yes,
keep us
exactly,
nice
yes,
and tight and firm.
yes. And then the collagen in that study, there was actually more collagen produced by the Skin Diary night cream than the tretinoin. I mean, caveat that we are scientists and we realise this is just one study, and that, we need to test it again and have further studies and validate this. But it's really exciting to know that a cream that will be an over-the-counter product can be that effective. So, we're really excited about that one.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And Chris, if you get him on, will tell you lots about the polyphenols and the anthocyanins and the flavonoids and all that side of things.
Yeah, it's nice because it's sort of bringing together the, it makes sort of perfect sense. I mean, obviously retinoids coming from vitamin A and vitamin C. And I mean, a lot of these things come from plants, but it's nice to have, to
yeah,
actually sort of...
And I kind of do think about that. I mean, I'm sure some of the kind of naturopaths think, hang on a minute, these medics are now just jumping on our bandwagon. I think the thing about what we try to do in medicine is, we always try and look at evidence-based research and the science and, make sure that the facts are really there before recommending things. And maybe that wasn't so much there in the past, but now it's heading that way, and the research around particularly flavonoids is really, really fascinating. I mean, things like polypodium leucotomas is a type of flavonoid that's now in some not anti-aging creams, SPF, so the Heliocare range. They have their own proprietary polypodium leucotomas, which is fern block, and you can get polypodium leucotomas as supplements. And there's some studies showing it does reduce your minimal erythema dose. So, all
what is
of
your
this,
minimal erythema dose?
So minimal erythema is the time it takes for you to burn, basically. So it's reducing your sensitivity to UV exposure.
Very good. The people often wonder about a couple of things. When to start preventative skincare, and a thing I often get asked is sort of like, my skincare has stopped working, I have to change it around. Does your skincare stop working? When should you start, and do you have to change your skincare regularly because it stops working?
I mean, again, the when should you start is another thing that's become quite controversial with all of these teenagers. And, even my 9-year-old is telling me that all the other girls at school have a skincare routine, Mum. And, my mum's a dermatologist. I need a skincare routine. And no, they don't need a skincare routine. I mean, at an early age.
9?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. She's talking about serums and things. And I just, she just needs to cleanse, wear her sunblock, moisturize. That's it. I think the thing about it is with when you're younger, you can get all of these things from your diet, So if you have a healthy diet, your skin will take up all those nutrients quite easily. The problem is, as we age, we have been exposed to the elements, and generally with aging, all of these nutrients become depleted from your skin. So the fascinating thing actually about retinols and vitamin A is that as we get older and your vitamin A levels reduce, you have more vitamin A receptors in your skin. So the more photodamaged you are, the more receptive you are to vitamin A. So basically, the better your topical retinoids work. So
basically, you've damaged your skin. The receptors is going, give me more. What's going to help repair it?
Your vitamin A levels are depleted. So if your vitamin A levels are depleted, the theory is that the receptors are primed to take any vitamin A that arrives on them. So if you are repleting your vitamin A by putting it on topically, then you're likely to get a better effect. So I have a lot of elderly patients who come in and say, skincare, I'm way past that because I'm in my 70s and my skin's very photo damaged. And I have to say, no. Let's try some prescription grade tretinoin, and the results are usually great. So it makes them very, very happy. So that's good. So the second question I think was, so that was the first. So when should we start? I think good skincare throughout your 20s is important. I think people generally start using the antioxidant serums and things in their 30s, which makes sense. And maybe, not things like prescription grade retinoids until maybe a bit later in their 30s and on, and just the maybe over-the-counter retinoids make sense. And then after that, if you think about it, it's just replenishing nutrients. So, to continue doing that lifelong makes sense. And should we change up our skincare? Is that what you were asking?
Yes, my skincare has stopped working. I hear that a lot.
I think
some people just have to realise that you actually get to a certain point that this is it.
Some people, you continue to age, with every hour and every day, we're all aging. But I think maybe that is, I think if your skin is getting a bit dull, it might be that they're not using the right products, maybe. A lot of people will just moisturize. I have a lot of people who come in and I'll ask them about their skincare routine and they'll say, yes, I cleanse, I tone, I moisturize. There's a lot of people who are still in that kind of a rut. And I ask them about topical skincare and what they're using, and they're just maybe not really using the right things like active ingredients, which are just going to increase your skin cell turnover, which just makes you look that little bit brighter and glowier, that glow that we all want.
Because I guess if the studies show that something is effective up to a certain percentage, then you can't just keep pushing and pushing above that, because A, there's nothing to say that it's actually going to be any better, or B, you might actually be doing yourself some damage.
No, I mean, there's definitely a percentage that, you don't want to go above, because it's all about efficacy and irritancy, basically. So you want to get to a level that's effective and not cause irritation. So there's definitely a level of potency that you kind of will stop at. And that depends on everyone's skin. Everyone's individual, depending on different skin types and different needs. But generally, I think, as we said before, mixing things up and using different products and using, ceramides and peptides and some acids and exfoliators and all those different things is going to replenish everything that your skin needs.
You've mentioned alpha hydroxy acids a couple of times, which is like your glycolic acid or your lactic acid,
yes,
things like that. Why are they important and what do they do?
So they're kind of more exfoliants. So they're good at getting rid of the, kind of stagnant layers of keratinocytes that might be on the epidermis or in the in the hair follicle. So they're good for exfoliation. They also have a lot of anti-aging benefits, which are really yet to be we know the pathway of retinoids very well. But we don't understand the pathway really of how the glycolic acid and lactic acids are working as anti-aging products, but they definitely have a part to play. But using them specifically at certain times, maybe once or twice a week is enough, because they can be quite irritating, especially at the higher percentages.
Yeah. The interesting, the sort of the bricks and mortar that you mentioned before of the skin as well. And, people I've heard people worry that, if they use too many exfoliators or retinoids too much, that they're going to be thinning their skin.
Yeah.
Are they thinning their skin?
So, I mean, you can definitely cause irritation. When people say thinning the skin, I think they mean that they might be thinning their epidermis, but it's really the stratum corneum, which is that kind of top layer of dead skin cells. The stratum corneum, when you start using retinoid products, does flatten, but then it thickens up again. So you're not, you're not thinning your epidermis. No, I mean, I think people think that maybe because their skin gets a bit sensitive, and that's why they think, oh, I'm thinning out my skin, but they're definitely not. With the retinoids, they actually end up thickening the dermis and epidermis long term.
Interesting study came out the other day about, they compared drinking water, because obviously you've got to be incredibly well maintained, and you should be drinking 2 litres of water a day, and that's going to sort of like smooth out every wrinkle that you've ever had. So they compared people who were drinking 2 litres of water a day with people who were moisturising 3 times a day and people who were doing nothing.
Yeah.
And in the end, they found that the drinking of the water made absolutely no difference.
Yeah, but you're just going to metabolize it out, basically. I mean, what you want for your skin is to keep the water in. We talk about transepidermal water loss, and that's what the moisturizers, the humectant moisturizers and occlusives are doing. You're putting a layer onto your skin and stopping water loss, which is a big problem in certain skin diseases like eczema. And so you are much better where putting on moisturizer to hydrate your skin than you are drinking a glass of water to hydrate your skin. Obviously, for your general health, it's good to, keep hydrated. But as regards hydrating your skin, you need to put a moisturiser on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, this is what they call the transepidermal water loss that we're sort of looking at. And this is the skin barrier itself, in skin barrier repair. How important is that? If we're looking at ingredients that go for that, especially for people with sensitive skin, rosacea, those kinds of things. Yeah. Even acne, that skin barrier, how important is it to maintain it?
It's very important. It's implicated in a lot of skin conditions, even rosacea and eczema. Particularly, we know about it in the inflammatory skin conditions like eczema. But so we think the skin barrier can be impaired for lots of reasons, but particularly if the microbiome is altered, that's another area of a lot of study in the field of dermatology, because it has a huge impact on your skin barrier function. But the things that you need for skin barrier repair are really moisturizers, and that the ceramides, as you mentioned, are very good ones. You have humectant moisturizers like the hyaluronic acid and glycerin and squalene. All of these things are quite good for repairing skin barrier. And generally, all of even the serums, but mostly creams, are formulated in a way that they have lots of different humectant and different moisturizers, basically, that will improve skin barrier and skin function.
Yep. Niacinamide as well is quite good at that, apparently.
Yes, yes, it is. It's good for skin barrier repair. It's good as an anti-inflammatory. It's a real kind of all-rounder niacinamide.
Going back to the niacinamide for a second, you had a man come into your office once who did a split face test on himself.
Yes, yeah.
How effective
One of my
was the
favourite patients.
How effective was the niacinamide that he applied to himself?
So yes, this was a patient of mine in his 80s who is fantastic, because this is one of those days when I just came out of my office buzzing. Basically, he came in and he said, "Claire, I'd like you to tell me if there's a difference between this side of my face and this side of my face." And I said, "Well, everyone's a bit asymmetrical, and don't worry about it. There's nothing that anyone would notice." And he said, No. I have been putting a cream on this side of my face for 6 weeks.
Which isn't very long.
And not very long, but to be that diligent, at home to do your own, we call them split face studies in dermatology, and they are, the best form of a study, because testing a cream on the same person's face as a split face study is kind of the gold standard way to do it. But not many people will do that because they just don't want to put something on one side of their face. But he was,
Well, you were remembering which side of the face you were doing it on.
He basically said he did it because people had told him this cream was good, but he wanted to know if it definitely was, if he was going to be spending his money on it. And I thought that was quite sensible.
Fair enough.
And it was just clearly obvious sitting across the table from him. I got out my big magnifier and thought, oh, great. But it was clearly obvious sitting across the table, so much so that I went down the corridor and got the nurses and said, "Come down, I want you to have a look and tell me." And they could easily tell as well. So, and I thought it was going to be a retinoid. I thought he was putting a retinoid on his skin because that would be the most obvious one. But no, it was niacinamide. He was putting on a 5% niacinamide serum on one side of his face for 6 weeks, and it just looked far brighter, far less visible pores, much smoother, and overall just skin quality much better. So really, really interesting. And from then on, I've been convinced that niacinamide topically is definitely something to recommend.
Pore size, that's an interesting one, because you can't shrink pore sizes, but basically if you've got good skin structure, it will make them look less visible.
Yes, well, things like so you can shrink sebaceous glands with topical retinoids will do that. But as we get older, the pores become more visible often, you're right, because the kind of structure around them is being lost because you're losing collagen and elastin. So if you're improving all the plumpness everywhere else, you're improving collagen and elastin, you can shrink the sebaceous glands a little bit, then you reduce visible pores.
All right, one last question. Necks.
Necks,
yes. Are they as receptive to retinoids as the rest of the skin?
So in general, people don't really realise, but your facial skin is actually much more robust than the skin kind of from the chin down. So when we're doing laser treatments, we can use much higher settings on the face. And that's to do with pilosebaceous units. So because you have lots of the sebaceous glands in your face, your skin on the face repairs quicker. So basically you can use higher doses of active ingredients on the face than you can on your neck without getting irritated. So you can definitely use active ingredients on the neck, and they will definitely make a difference and be effective. Generally, people find they might have to use lower strengths. So sometimes I tell people maybe just mix a little bit of your serum in with your night cream, and that would be a way to do it, just to start off. But necks are always a bugbear. Décolletage and the backs of the hands as well are another giveaway of age.
And the eyes, can we use a retinoid on the eyes? That's the other people say no, too delicate, but can you?
Yes. The eye skin is the same as the skin everywhere else. It's just a little bit thinner and it doesn't have that layer of fat behind it. So you definitely can. Again, that's another area I tell people, if you're worried, just mix a little bit of your cream in with your night cream, or just put some cream there first, some of your night cream there, just to buffer the active ingredients a little bit, or dab them around. It depends, you don't want to be putting it right on the rim, but you can get there into that kind of tear trough crease. And topical retinoids work really well there, because the reason why tear troughs can be a problem is because that pigmentation that you see is actually just a reflection of the muscle underneath, the muscle and the blood vessels underneath. So by thickening the skin, by thickening the dermis, by using things like your vitamin A's creams, by thickening the dermis, you reduce that reflection of the muscle underneath. So yeah, that is definitely an area that you should be using your active skincare.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Claire. And if people want to find Skin Diary and try it out, where do they find it?
They can go to the website, so theskindiary.com, and you'll find all the information you need there, and contact anybody from the team who would be very, very happy to give you some more details.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fiona. A pleasure.